Hey, this is Drew with Tredas, bringing a PowerPoint presentation, Farm Hedging 101 to you. Over the years, we've been asked to put together, if we had something that would better explain hedging, how it works on your farm, how hedge gain versus hedge loss, how that relates back to farm revenue, and just to better understand that you guys could watch, that you or your business partner or spouse or banker could watch, and to better explain exactly how we're doing it and why we're doing it, and where the hedge gain, loss, and margin calls come from. So the goal of this is to give you a tool that you can watch at your own convenience, watch as many times as you want to, ask as many, and then once you get done watching it, come back to us with any questions and we can help further clarify some things. So with that, I'll get started here. So the goal of this, again, is to explain hedging, understanding the difference in futures versus carry versus basis decisions, understanding the functionality of a hedge gain or loss as it relates to your farm's revenue. So the first question we need to answer is, why do we pre-harvest market? So our marketing goal is to set up a marketing plan for our client. It's customized, but gets them pre-harvest hedged up to a level that they want to hedge. That could be up to their insurance guarantee, or it could be at X% of the crop, but that up to that insurance guarantee would probably, in most situations, be the maximum that we would go up to. But that's based, as you'll see on the next slide, based on historical seasonal patterns. We also want to, by the time you guys put the crop in the ground, you pretty much know your input costs, or most of them. And so we want to match up the revenue opportunities we have during the growing season as you know your input costs. So here would be a December corn futures chart for the last 30 years. More research puts this out. It's got, you can see in red, 5-year, 15 and 30-year patterns. January being the beginning of the year, December being at the end, 0 being contract low and 100 being contract high. So they index it on contract low versus high, and which is nice. What's nice about that is you don't have $2 corn and $8 corn on the same chart. You have where that crop's contract low and contract high was put in on the chart. And so what you can see from here, studies show that 76% of the time we put our high in December corn futures, sometime prior to 4th of July, go lower into the back half of the summer and into harvest, and usually get a bounce off of harvest into Thanksgiving, Christmas. That means that 24% of the time we do put our high in sometime in this post July 1 time frame. So we want to make small incremental hedges on a pre-harvest marketing plan throughout this time frame. We want to make small increments on what we'd consider market strength in small increments during this time frame. So here's a triangle, and it shows that in order to be efficient, we want to have a pre-harvest marketing plan where we separate out all 3 of these decisions. Instead of making a flat price sale, we want to make a futures decision and a carry decision and a basis decision, all independent of each other. And so that triangle that it creates is part of our name in Tredas. So Trey being 3, there's 3 parts to marketing grain. We want to separate out a futures decision from a carry decision and a basis decision. We'll show you why. So this table just illustrates the different ways we can go about selling grain. So if we make a cash sale, flat price contract, we are locking in all 4 of these things at one time. We got a futures decision, futures price, basis price, point of delivery, and time of delivery. So if we know we need to take risk off the farm and we can make a cash price sale, but we're locking in all 4 of these things at one time. We're locking in a futures level, we're locking in a basis level, we're locking in where we want to deliver it and the time we want to deliver it. And if that sale's 6 to 9 months out, we're having to make all those decisions on one day. We might think we want to haul it in December, but when we get out to December, maybe we're busy, maybe our trucks broke down, maybe the basis has improved a lot, and we would have rather had it delivered to a different delivery point or different time. The next possible way to go about it would be basis only contract. So that leaves the futures level unlocked, but it locks in the other three things. So we're locking in the basis level and where we want to deliver and the time we want to deliver it. The only reason you would use a basis only contract is if you like the basis level, you think it's going to get weaker, but you don't like the futures level yet. That would be one reason you'd want to do a basis only contract. Very rarely do we do these. You'll see them probably more often in specialty crops like white corn, or if there's some type of specialty crop where we can lock in a premium that would be worth planting it. We want to get at least some of that basis locked in. Hedge derive would be the next alternative. Hedge derive leaves the futures, locks the futures in, but leaves the basis open. It leaves the time of delivery open. We've got an asterisk here of point of delivery, because more often than not, you'd be locking in a certain location, but it might be a flexible hedge derive where you can pick from maybe a handful of different locations delivered to, but you are in that situation, you're locked in to delivering through the grain company that you did the hedge derive with. So we'll have to deliver the bushels under their name, even if that is a flexible point of delivery. But the basis is open. They typically charge a fee for this, but it leaves the basis open and the time of delivery. We might have to pay a roll fee if we want to move the delivery time frame out. The most efficient way to go about it would be to establish a futures position. So this is where we lock in a futures level at a price that makes sense for your operation. But we leave the basis open, we leave the delivery point open, and we leave the time of delivery open. So we've got ultimate flexibility to move the grain where we want to, when we want to, and at whatever basis level the market gives us in the future. But we've got a futures level locked in that makes sense for your operation. All right, so first we're going to focus on the futures level of this triangle and dive a little bit more into that. So the next question is, how do we use futures? How do we utilize futures in your operation? So if we come to the conclusion that a futures account makes sense for your operation, we'll open up a hedge account. We clear through RJ O'Brien. We are a guaranteed introducing broker to RJO, which is the futures commission merchant. So your hedge account would be through RJ O'Brien. So we're going to go through a hedge example. So this would be, you're going to raise corn. It's either in the field or in the bin, and we decide that we want to put a hedge on at $5 as an easy round number. So we short the board. You're long in your bin or long in the field, and we're going to short means we're going to sell $5 futures level. So this is just done in a futures account, which is financially settled. Your futures account is financially settled. It is not tied to any, as we just went over, it's not tied to any physical delivery point yet. We put this short position on your futures account at $5. So let's say the market moves up and it moves up to $6. So we've shorted at 5, it's moved to 6. That's going to create a $1 hedge loss here. So we've put $1 in your RGO account, and now the market's at $6. We can go cash sell that corn at $6. We have a $1 hedge loss. That's going to get us back to $5 net, which is exactly where we started at. It's $5 is the short position we out on, and we ended up with $5 cash. We made a cash sell at a $6 market, took the $1 hedge loss off, and got to 5. A down market scenario would be the opposite of that. We hedged at 5, and the market went to 4. So we've got a $1 gain in your RGO account. We made a cash sale at $4, add the $1 hedge gain on, and we net $5, which is exactly where we started at. So what this shows is that in an up market, the hedge loss isn't lost. It will be recaptured when we make the cash sale. What is lost is the opportunity cost of the higher market. So once the $5 is established, that's the level you're going to get, plus or minus any basis level. We can't create anything different out of it. It's a $5 hedge. And so when you get to a $6 market, yes, you do have a $1 hedge loss, but you netted 5, which is right where you started at. That was the goal of when you put the $5 on, that you wanted $5. And so we hedged the $5. So it's not lost. What is lost is the opportunity cost to go sell 6 and not have any repercussions to it. So this would be an example of a market going an up market as we hedge into an up market. So in this example, we have 100,000 bushel expected production producer. They take 80% insurance, so they have 80,000 insured bushels, and that's the goal. Is we're going to get up to is 80,000 insured bushels hedged prior to harvest, and we're going to hedge 20% increments, 20,000 bushels at a time. So if we start hedging at $5, and the next increment we do is 525, the next increment 550, the next increment 575 to get to the 80,000 done, and we get at harvest, we're at $6. We will have hedge losses of the first 40,000 here from $5 to 6 is a $20,000 loss, 525 to 6 is 15, and so on. We'll have a $50,000 hedge loss, which is all of our hedges compared to the current market of 6 is going to create a $50,000 hedge loss. We can go make a harvest sale on that $6 market, all 100,000 bushels at $6, so $600,000 of revenue. Pay off our $50,000 hedge loss, which gives us a net revenue of $550,000. So that would be a straight up market hedging in small increments on the way up in a market from 5 to 6 at harvest. Next slide will show the opposite of that, starting out at 5 and a market headed towards 4. So we put our first hedge on at 5, and the next one 475, 450, 425, and then at harvest we sell all 100,000 bushels at $4. We have hedge gains on from 5 to 4, 475 to 4, creating a $50,000 hedge gain. So a $50,000 hedge gain on top of the harvest cash sale revenue of $400,000 gives us a net revenue of $450,000. So you can see that the goal isn't necessarily a hedge gain or loss. That's not the focus of what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is keep your farm independent, keep the basis open, and keep as much flexibility as possible. And in years where you have hedge losses like this one, typically the revenue is going to be higher. If we do nothing but have make our first sale as our highest sale and go nothing but lower, the net revenue for the farm is going to work its way lower, even with the hedge gain. So you shouldn't ever put a hedge on and hope that that first hedge is going to have this significant hedge gain, because that meant that the market went nothing but lower, and every opportunity you had to sell after that was lower and lower yet. So you can see from this example, the hedge gain had a hedge loss of 50,000 for a total farm net revenue after a hedge loss of 50,000 of 550 grand. In this example, we went lower from 5 to 4, had a hedge gain of 50,000 and farm sales, harvest sales of 400 for a net revenue of 450. So $100,000 lower than the previous example. And obviously the market doesn't go straight up or straight down. Here would be a corn chart from 2022 and just showing, different levels that we would make increments. Again, we want to try to make small increments on what we can perceive market strength, technically overbought conditions, given us small incremental opportunities throughout the seasonal average time frame. So 2021 corn, if we were a hedger, this would just be an example of making sales at hedges on at 560, 565, 615, 557, and then harvest was a 550 level. So we have harvest sales of 100,000 bushels at 550. Our hedge gains end up being 19,400. And so our net revenue for that farm was 569,400 with the hedge gain. In some cases, we talked about 76% of the time we put our high in prior to 4th of July and go lower. 24% of the time, like 2012 drought year, we had a pretty extreme move up into the back half of the year. So here would be an example of a 2012 hedge scenario where we hedged the first 20,000 at 530, another one at 520, one at 522. Last hedge right around 4th of July at 630. The market ended up continuing to go up to 850, leveled off, came back a little bit, and was roughly at 750 at harvest. So go sell our 100,000 bushels at harvest at 750. And we had a hedge loss of 159,600, which was all the hedge levels versus the current market of 750. And so total net revenue for the farm was 590,400, which if you look back to the 2021 was 569. So just comparing those two markets, 2021 had a small hedge gain with a total net revenue of 569. 2012 would have had a pretty sizable hedge loss, but the total net revenue, including the hedge loss, was still higher than the 2021 example. In 2012, we traded some pretty strong basis levels here also, which would have created some pretty opportunities. So we'll talk about potential advantage of basis next in our next slide. So why do we use futures? We talked about how we use futures. Now we're moving on to why we use futures. If we go back to that table again of the unlocked versus locked, by having a futures hedge account, we can keep the other two areas completely independent. We're independent of all grain end users. Creates ultimate flexibility of delivery time and location. Because the futures position is financially settled, we have ultimate flexibility to do what makes most sense for your operation at the time of delivery, whether that means going to what facility, what time of year, or maybe you decide you want to keep that corn for feed, or you got hailed out. It's financially settled and we can deal with that. We don't have to pay any cancellation of contracts to end users. And also basis tends to appreciate as we get closer to delivery. Now, this isn't a hard fast rule. It's not a guarantee, but over the years of trading grain, we've seen that typically the bids that are on a bid sheet 6, 9, 12, 18 months in the future tend to get better as we get closer to that spot market. And we'll go through a couple of examples. Here would be ADM Columbus's bid sheet from 2021. Here's the bid sheet from Friday, May 7th. And it shows if we know we want to move corn in, say, November, December time frame, we're going to put it in the bin in October. We're going to pull it out, get the bin tops out, November, December. They are, as of May 7th, showing us a 12 under the December bid for November and an 8 under for December. Fast forward to December 8th, the CH, that's the March futures versus December, they've already rolled to the March and they're showing a 10 over the March bid, which the December at that time, the December was trading about 10 cents weaker. So actually a 10 over the March would be the equivalent of a 20 over the December. We'll kind of get into carry next, but just know that at the time when the flat price was 5.97 using a 10 over the March, the March board was 10 cents better than the December. So this would be an equivalent of 20 over the December on the example we'll show you next slide. So back to that 2021 hedge example, we hedged corn at 560, 565, 615, 557. And we had futures of 550. So we had a hedge gain of 19,400. We could have made a sale based on that of cash sale at 550 and that 20 over basis level for 20 over basis level for 570, 100,000 revenue, which is 589,400. If we were just making forward contracts as we went throughout this time frame using the bid sheet that we just showed you, at the time of these sales, we would have been using 8 under basis on the first 4 sales, and then that 10-20 over number on the last one. So the end result of just hedging it and leaving the basis component open resulted in a net revenue gain in this example of 24,400. And I would say that's probably a somewhat average or normal example. 2022 with the Western Corn Belt drought would be a pretty extreme example to the upside. So again, we're using ADM Columbus's bid sheet here from 2022. As of June 1st, we had a bid sheet for, let's say, same thing, you want to move corn in November. They were a 691 futures at the time with an 8 under basis level, so 683 cash. So if we want to throw a dart and lock in futures, carry, and basis all in one time frame, we could just write up a cash sale for 683. Our opinion would be, no, let's hedge it and look for basis opportunities and leave the delivery location, delivery time frame, and the basis all open until we get out to a later date closer to your delivery time frame. Fast forward to November 25th. The basis was 75 over the December for November delivery, last week of November delivery. So we saw a 8 under to 75 over, an 83-cent basis improvement for the same delivery time frame. Just fast forward the calendar 5 months, 5.5 months. So here would be a 2022 hedge example. Hedge corn at 735, 750, 715, and 635. And the harvest time frame was 675. So if we were a forward contractor, we would have been forward contracting on those dates using that same basis level of 8 under. And then the last sale was made at the 75 over. So total, if a forward cash seller, you would have had net revenue of 710,600. By just simply looking at it a little bit differently, hedge levels at the same price, but just leaving the basis open until time of delivery and locking in a 75 over basis level on all of it, as opposed to the 8 under on the bid sheet back in June, would have given us a farm harvest sale of a December sale of 750,000 plus the hedge gain of 27, so 777. So that's a revenue gain of 66,400 just on improved basis levels from the time you would have been a cash seller to being a hedger and locking in basis at a more opportune time post-harvest. And this is, again, another more research chart. Just shows, this is number 2 yellow cash corn. And what it shows is that combined futures and basis levels for a cash price, typically lowest at harvest, and we usually get pretty good carry out into January through April. Now, some of this is improved futures levels coming out of harvest, but a lot of it is basis appreciation. So we want to, again, to try to separate out that triangle, separate out a futures decision from a carry decision from a basis decision, treat all 3 of those things independently on your farm. And same thing with the soybean chart as well. So we talked about futures, how we lock in futures, why we lock in futures during a pre-harvest time frame. We're going to talk a little bit about, and we just talked about the why we lock in futures as it relates to potential basis change and the flexibility around the delivery time frame and location. So now we're going to talk about carry. What does carry mean? And so oftentimes you hear the word carry being thrown around. Well, what does that really mean? Well, if there's carry in a market, it means that we have December, that the deferred futures contracts are worth a premium to the nearby one. And that's what they mean by carry in a market. So as an example, if we have a $6 December futures level, and you look up the March futures and they're at 615, and the May 625, the July 635, they're 645. We have 15 cents carry from December to March. We have 25 cents carry December to May. We have 35 cents carry December to July. And so what that means is that the market's willing to pay you more. The futures market is telling you that they're willing to pay you more to hold that grain into the future. Now, obviously, there's a basis component of this that we have to take into consideration as well. So if our options are to deliver the corn at harvest at 30 under basis level, $6 minus a 30 under basis is 570 cash. Well, if there's 15 cents carry to March, that's actually, we're selling that corn at 45 under the March because we're getting that same 570 cash, which means we're selling it at 55 under the May and so on to we're actually selling a 75 under the September. So we want to treat your farm any storage you do have on your farm as a mini grain elevator and maximize the return we can get by looking at your bin site the same way a grain company would, of when should we be moving corn off the farm, and converting that to a physical sale and lock it in basis. So if we can, if this is the way the market looks at harvest when you put that grain in the bin, if we have it hedged, then you need to look at it from a standpoint that if you're putting grain in the bin at 30 under, which is 45 under the March, which is 55 under the May, do we think we can go trade something better than a 45 under the March or 55 under the May when we get out to this time frame that outpaces your storage costs and opportunity costs of your money to justify holding it out to that time frame? And if so, what logistically works for your farm, what cash flow works for your farm, and what type of return on investment of your bin site would that create? And so those are the decisions that we're helping our clients make, and by separating out a futures and a carry and a basis decision. But none of this really means a whole lot unless we have the crop hedged. And if you don't have the board stopped in the form of a hedge, then obviously the board can go up or down daily. And this really, while it's maybe relevant, it really doesn't matter that much if you don't have the board stopped and you don't have a futures level that was established that can be rolled out. So you are just purely focused on carry and basis after that initial hedge was made. The opposite of a carry market would be an inverted market. So in this example, we have a 560 December futures. In every futures month after that, we actually have a lower market all the way to the next new crop market. And you'll see this in years where you have tight carryouts. So what the market's telling us in this situation is that we want your grain sooner than later. We don't have a lot of grain. Everyone's expecting tight carryouts. And so we're paying a premium to get your grain to come to the market today versus sometime in the future. And so with a basis component also to look at, if our options are to move that corn at 30 under at harvest, which is 530 cash. If there's 20-cent discount, 20-cent inverse from December to March, that's actually a 10 under the March. So, and then that would be a equivalent of a 30 over new crop basis. So if we are potentially going to hold grain through an inverted futures market, the basis has to do the work to get us back to at least cash. So if basis stays at 30 under, this 530 cash is going to turn into 510 cash. And so this year would be a good example of, we're currently trading somewhere between 70 and 90 over corn basis. That's been a function of going through a couple inverted futures months to get here. So yes, we are trading, call it a 75 over basis level in spring of 2023, but that was a function of going through an inverse from December to March, and then a pretty large inverse from March to May, and now May to July. So that 90 over, while it is 90 over the July or 75 over the July, as an example that we're trading currently, is not indicative of what we could have had versus the December at the time. So you have to take those things into consideration, but you want to think of, in an inverted market, you need basis to appreciate by at least the inverse to make up and get us back to a net flat cash price. So in this example, basis has to get to at least 10 under just to get us back to the same 530 cash. It has to get to 30 over to get to the same 530 cash based off of new crop corn. So a lot of times in tight carryout years, you'll see premium for early quick ship delivery as the market rolls from old crop to new, and that new crop December futures is at a discount. We, on the first crop out of the field, is going to be that transition from old crop to new. Some potentially strong basis levels opportunities present themselves, and so we want to be positioned to take advantage of that if that works for your farm. And the way to do that is to have a hedge on, but not be tied to any facility or delivery time frame. So if it logistically works for you and we can take advantage of an early harvest program, whether that's a wet program to a feedlot, or ethanol plant needs some corn, or they're trying to get a shuttle train out early and still get old crop values for it, Those are the opportunities that we want to be positioned for. So this is kind of just a real brief, basic overview of everything we talked about as far as how and why we lock in futures, hedge gain or loss. Obviously, there's a cost to a line of credit. So I'm not. These are all just gross revenues. We did not put in, some of the expenses incurred as far as interest expense. Those are all things that we are definitely aware of, and when we talk to our clients, factor into what we think would be the return net of expenses to your operation. But we definitely want to think in terms of a pre-harvest marketing plan that separates out these three things. And so hopefully that's shed some light on how we look at the world and how a basic hedge looks, hedge gain or loss. Here's our RJO futures disclaimer that says that obviously nothing's guaranteed in trading. The goal, like I said, of putting on those hedges isn't to create a gain in your futures account, but more position yourself for opportunity down the road and lock in a futures level that makes sense for your operation at that time. So that concludes this presentation, but highly encourage you to give your broker a call and go through any further questions that this might have created. Have a great day.